people jumping on. So yeah, welcome to the first episode of the year for the Digital Fashion Innovator Series here on Instagram Live. My name is Marie Bastian and I'm the CEO and founder of World of Mesh. And yeah, today we're celebrating this era of digital fashion, and we're bringing together all the amazing talents that are around the globe to share their stories and to hear a little bit about their experience and their learnings, and to celebrate you guys on the way, and to share it also with this whole new generation of digital creatives that are just joining us right now and ready to jump in with everything that's going on. So yeah, all our guests are speaking on behalf of themselves and not for the companies they're working for. And as usual, if you guys have any questions, add them down in the comments and we'll hopefully get back to them at the end of the session. And if not, we'll definitely get back to them with a message or anything. So yeah, with that said, I think we can get started. Our guest today is Bhargava Kummamuru, and he's also called Ram in our field. Everyone knows him usually under that name. And welcome to our show. It's so good to have you on.
Thanks for. I think it's a nice kind of a concept that you have come here, and I think it gives a platform for a lot of us to share our insights of the industry, and we can make it more of a global space for us to share.
Thanks so much. That's so good to hear. So I'll just kick it off with a little introduction for you, Ram. So yeah, as a product owner at H&M, Ram is leading a team that is setting the digital foundation at H&M to enable a flawless digital product creation, actually. And from what you told me, Ram, you started your journey as an engineer, actually. And that's a super interesting story, which we're really excited to hear more about. Because at first, when you moved to Italy, you actually made that switch into digital fashion. And you learned all about coding, AI, and 3D. And you did that by, pursuing a day job as an engineer and a night job as a computer technician. And that's really, really exciting to hear a little bit about that background. But yeah, other than that, you had then the opportunity to join Adidas and joined them as a prototyper and took that journey right straight into the sportswear fashion world. And after that, you switched to H&M. And where you actually have right now a team that you're leading, and you guys are responsible for delivering the components for digital. Sorry, I just have to check my notes again. Deliver the digital components for being responsible for creation and user experience within the H&M community. Now I got it. Sometimes I just have to jump on my notes in the background and somehow catch up. Yeah. So, with that introduction, Ram, I think your passion for 3D is absolutely evident. You have this really strong drive for 3D, for business topics, and you're playing this huge role in bringing this, H&M digital product creation to a really good speed. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So I think one of the things that you raised there is it's just a space that I love, the world of 3D. And fortunately I got into it, and I have no regrets till this date, actually. Yeah.
So was there any special moment or something that sparked your interest when you did that switch in your career? Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are maybe not yet in digital fashion, but they know they might have skills and they're not sure where they can add them. Do you have anything specific you remember from back then?
Yeah, I think one of the kind of the moments that is really interesting was, I think it was back there, starting to get in my interest into architecture, because I used to have a lot of friends in architecture. And a couple of people that I know, and one of my good friends also, he kind of said, let's go and go to this event to listen to this architect called Winnie Maas. And I just sat there and this guy called Winnie Maas, he's a very famous Dutch architect, and he just spoke about the future where, the 3D fashion, and not just fashion, but architecture, technologies, how they all come together. And I think for 1 week, I kind of dropped out. And I was I'm done with engineering, and got myself into architecture. But also the reason I got into architecture was because I kind of ended up realizing that that is only lab that could work after 5. So kind of first actually wanted to go into computational design, but then I realized that no labs work that late. So only architects work actually very late in the evenings. So
Yeah.
then actually entering into the architecture world, and then kind of like got myself into 3D, and from there it just started my journey in the 3D world. Yeah.
You know, we actually have that in common because I also did a step in architecture at the beginning with parametric design, you know, designing buildings on coding based. So I can, and you know what, that also definitely fired my love for 3D design. So we actually have that in common. I didn't know that. So that's super nice.
Of those persistent people that I worked with, and one of the guys called Legio, and like he was one of those guys who actually inspired me to enter into this field actually. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of 3D designers also, or creators in general, know doing these long night shifts and getting into the nitty-gritty details of 3D designing. It was fun times. I'm glad they're behind us, but yeah, definitely was a very impressionable time that stuck with us. So yeah, today we're going to be speaking about tech pipelines. So, you know, we see a lot of great projects out there, a lot of massively talented people and brands, and, you know, bringing just really amazing visuals out there. But behind every project, there always is a tech pipeline. So maybe we can just get started with a quick definition, just so everyone out there knows what we're talking about, what a tech pipeline actually is.
yeah, it's kind of like, when I started thinking of how to, you know, answer normally when it comes to tech pipelines, it's always a very tricky one because it's a very geeky technical stuff. But if I would like to summarize it, I think tech pipelines are nothing but you have some things places where you have to store stuff. So those are like your libraries, and somewhere you have to run the processes, like what you have conventionally in fashion world is PLMs, product lifecycle management systems, and pipelines are nothing but how do you connect those pieces. They help you to connect like from what you store to what you want to put in process. And then what I like to call it as like a magic it does is basically where it takes the data and then starts playing with the data. And then you can start basically creating automations, integrations, and everything to ease the process. So basically, it's nothing but transfer of information and manipulation of information is basically what it boils down to. Actually.
Yeah, and the nice part is that it's like I mentioned before, it's not just big companies and global brands that have tech pipelines. Freelancers have tech pipelines. People that are just having fun being creative, you know, testing 3D tools, they also have tech pipelines. It's something that applies to everyone who's in the creative 3D industry, and that's why it's such an essential and important topic to also talk about.
I think it's also that it's not the conventional concept of having tech and creativity and business as three different entities was maybe in the years of 2000, was about maybe 2010. But in the years of 2020 and 2030, we're entering into it's not anymore two different things. It's not three different things. In order to be actually excelling in your field, especially in the world of 3D, you have to skill yourself in the world of tech.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, so you mentioned part of the tech pipelines are also the assets that are actually feeding into the system, because they're the ingredients that we use to create 3D visuals and projects. And can you share your take a little bit on what brands should keep in mind when they're creating these assets? So when they're actually working on them, like which requirements or qualities are needed, or how do they prioritize their planning? Maybe some general tips and tricks around that topic would be great.
I think when it comes to actually classically, when you look at 3D within the fashion industry, it kind of started from business development side of things. Mm-hmm. So business is the one that kind of pushed for, I want to work with 3D. It's not much of tech first. So when you want to create asset pipelines, we have to keep in mind the fact that assets needs to be adhered from business development, but there are some few nuances you have to think about from tech perspective. Things that could not be a prio from when you create an asset. Like let's take a fabric. When you create a fabric, it will not be a prio for you, say, from design perspective, you'll say, it looks great when I have visual look into it, but you won't think in terms of naming conventions, taxonomy, metadata, and all of those stuff. But once you build these assets and you have like huge libraries, if you look at one of the big libraries in the industry, you may end up seeing libraries of 15,000, 20,000 fabrics in the big top industries that are actually sitting in. And if you don't think about that and then build those libraries, you can't utilize them in the future technology automations. And then you may have to go back into the original files and do it. And to be honest,
do everything again.
Yeah. And if you look at most of the fashion industries right now that have been the front runners, they're actually going back to the whiteboard and rebuilding their assets because they realize that they have not considered that as an important thing. So that one I always consider as an important thing. But the second foremost is also understanding the realistic state of physical and digital. So there's always an expectation in here. A good example is avatars. Avatars is the one that you have a hypothesis that we want to make a perfectly looking fit and size avatars in the digital world. But if you look at the actual tech stacks of the fashion industry, if you look at Flow or Browseware or Optitex or anything, 3D has not matured enough to be as close as physical world. So creating a perfection is not important right now because you can't use it as a perfection thing. And in order to create those assets, it's very expensive. You need to put extremely expensive artists behind it, create assets, and you can't even utilize it in a cost-conscious manner. So there also has to be an expectation on what is good enough based on the present tech stacks, and where is the one that we have to take it next step because we are kind of prepared to go it there. So that level of business and tech understanding and making priority-based decisions will be critical when you want to build assets in my head.
Yeah. So to sum it up, we should think about the naming conventions, definitely have that in mind. And that's why it's also so important to talk about it from the very beginning, I think, because like you said, a lot of brands are redoing all these libraries, and it's not just fabrics, and the number you named is just an example. It goes in all the details that go into a garment.
And they're not cheap.
Yeah, it's intense. And the second one is thinking about what's really needed. Maybe we can also talk about that a little bit more. So, okay, let's say we have our 3D assets in place, and we have a tech pipeline that's working really good. How can we best utilize now this setup as a brand, and how can we connect it with the brand actually? Like, what are the points that you have to also think about in this process, even though you have everything set up?
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to, I think, if I go back again to the way the front runners have approached it, is always the hype and expectations of saying that, we want to do it because of making cool 3D stuff. And I think kind of going away from that ideology and actually understanding the brand strategy itself kind of boils down towards it. So when you want to connect towards e-commerce, you need something specific kind of a tech pipeline because you're more focused on specific places there. And otherwise, if you want to more focus on data-driven, it kind of changes there. So I think the way you want to utilize a tech pipeline to its hardcore extent is also understanding where you want to improvise your tech and business-based development and understanding behind it. And most importantly, boils down is how do you incorporate into the user experience? Conventionally, I've seen that tech gets excited and builds this beautiful infrastructure layers and everything, but they're not built it in scalable manner. So the more you start creating in scalable manner, it starts falling again apart. So you have to understand, it boils down to is that, every brand is unique and you have a brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's true. It really, and this is a topic that I think we touched base in every conversation until now in the Digital Fashion Innovator Series. It comes down to the strategy. And that's why it's so important to have that right, to have that vision, because it can be a moving target, because of course tech is evolving and there's new technology advancements coming in, feels like every week or almost every second day. It's really important for the teams to be able to deliver against that purpose that you have for these assets. You have to know exactly is it a brand that just wants a digital product creation to optimize the sample use, or do you want to really go into topics like metaverse? Do you want to create NFTs, a whole different story? You need a whole different skill set of teams on top of it. So you're absolutely right. I'm full on with you. You really have to think about what it's planned for and how it's going to be used, and to prepare accordingly.
But I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is also one of the things you mentioned is the tech development. Maybe if you look at the speed at which tech is evolving, maybe in the past 10 years back, it was maybe like 3-4 years, but literally evolving every year. The tech is evolving, and so you also have to make it flexible and adaptable enough, the pipelines, to adhere towards it. If somebody came to me 2 years back and talked about AI, I would have just stopped. Let's not talk about AI. It's not relevant. But now when you look at the Open AI and DALL-E and Midjourney and those things that are coming out, they can be incorporated eventually into the future. And that's what completely changes the dynamics of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it could completely change even tomorrow. Like NVIDIA can come up with something new that will completely disprove the entire theory that we had of what tech pipelines, conventional tech pipelines are supposed to be.
Absolutely.
You have to be up to speed to be up to date in terms of what's happening in the market.
Yeah, like for example, the whatever, we could incorporate that for the designers into the foundation or the tech landscape that we have for inspiration, for getting ideas, to support them in the creation process, to go through variations of colors, maybe also get new ideas. I'm a firm believer that it will never take place of a designer, because there's just a certain level that maybe it's just not there yet. I hope it will stay that way, because I think the creativity of humans combined with AI is, I think, the best winning team. Yeah, but definitely that's the big point. How do we plug these technologies into the pipeline? And how do we keep our pipeline also flexible enough to adapt to these things? Because there's a lot of solutions, out of the box solutions there. And in a lot of cases, it makes sense to jump in with I don't know, for example, I don't know, our friends from Swatchbook, they have a great library set up for fabrics. And, you know, it makes sense if you start out, they have everything set up with the vendors. So that's really good. But, you know, every brand has to think about it, right?
That's a good
sense.
bolstered buy versus build kind of an approach. You have to understand what's the actually market inside. You don't need to build everything from scratch. And there's like, we are a fashion brand, not a software brand. We're not a software companies, we're a fashion company. Our focus is to make sure that how we can create digital fashion at fast pace, not building everything by ourselves. And there are a lot of great companies, like once you mentioned Swatchbook, you have DMX Cloud, you have also we have great relations with, you know, like Adobe coming with Adobe Experience Manager. If you look at, like, you have great solutions in the market. So just look at them, understand exactly what you want out of your pipeline and evaluate, and then make a decision. You don't need to build things from scratch.
Yeah, and that's also the good thing, because a few years ago when you were looking at technology, not all were open for plugin systems. They didn't all have open APIs where you can just use the things modular and plug them together. And now it's getting better and better, and every company out there that is enhancing that is definitely on the right page. So that's really good.
But these companies are talking to one another. They are not.
That's good.
Sometimes even we don't need to build anything. The APIs, these companies are actually already talking to one another. PLM teams are talking to DAM systems. Design tools are talking to libraries and everything. So they're talking, these companies are talking. So, you know, we don't need to, maybe instead of be building it, maybe just telling them to talk to each other could actually solve the problem.
That could solve a lot of problems. Definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I think we also live in a time of collaboration. Like, this is becoming more and more of a topic between even between brands. If you see all the collaborations going on between the brands, we didn't have that like a decade ago, and it's happening throughout all industries. So it's nice that we're getting to this point, because things move so much quicker if you just work together and you collaborate. So that's a really good point. Oh, I like that little detour we took there. So just taking a look at my notes. So we also talked about it's really hard to also decide on like the actual quality of the assets and the capabilities that we're aiming for. How do we decide on getting the right quality if we have these right these right parameters in place? How do the teams really decide where it makes sense to allocate and focus on? Like, if we take the digital libraries, for example, what would be like a general approach that brands can take there?
I mean, when it comes to actually quality-wise, I think one of the things that I firmly believe is, I said, right, physical is still physical. Like, let's accept that. Where digital is not yet there, where you can replace physical. Mm-hmm. In the metaverse industry, they make this beautiful promo talking about, you know, the digital world, but you can't have it. If you put an Oculus VR headset, it's not the same. It's like a low poly, it's not great. So I think from an asset perspective, when we build these assets, we have to adhere not just from a technical perspective, but also adding the physical attributes. So also, for example, adding a physical photo of it, physical video of it. It's to kind of build the confidence from the design teams to understand the dual integrations between each other, and that needs to be adhered and kept in mind. Often we get so excited in digital that we think everything can be done in digital. So I think the quality when you talk about from asset perspective, I talk about is, yeah, the look of the fabric needs to be considered, how it is draped on a different shapes and everything. Instead of taking a single shot, maybe draping it on an object would be a good representation, but maybe having a drape representation in digital world and keeping next to it a drape representation in physical world gives a more expectation in terms of what you're coming out of it. Or you have an expectation that, oh, it looks so great, but then you put it in 3D software, you realize, oh, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I think I cut you off there. You go first. Yeah, so I just want to say that, yeah, it's a question of quality and also building trust. Like you said, the designers, especially the ones jumping in and starting out with this right now, they have to build a trust that it actually represents the physical attributes that are actually in the fabric, for example. And yeah, I know a lot of brands also start just with textures and visuals, and they don't even think about the physical properties of fabrics. And I think that's a step that brands evolve into. They just go one step after the other. But yeah, those are two really important points for sure.
Don't get hyped. Don't get hyped about 3D. 3D is so dope as same as physical. That's just fact. It is. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe one more question before we jump into the question round for anyone out there. You guys can already think about anything you want to ask Ram in this session. So what is your view on the biggest pros of digital product development? What do you think is the main win for us implementing these digital structures in fashion?
I mean, I think first I can take one step back to answer that question. And the way I would put it first is like, I think there is none like one thing as a prio. I think as a brand, you first need to realize what is it that you actually want to do. So for example, here an example is like if you go towards luxury brands, if you think of Gucci or something, the DPC value is completely different. You're not doing it because your major issue is not sustainability. Your major issue is not that. Your major issue is kind of conveying your product in a more meaningful way. Maybe there you will focus more on quality of the fabrics, high quality, high definitions, and everything. If you go more towards like maybe fast fashion, one of the places are speed fashion kind of places that I know we see it. In those places, a different thing. There you can sustainability, cost factors, cost consciousness, and everything. And then lastly, if you go towards more other kind of mid brands, which is like sports and all of them, there you can, like most of them use it for sell-in meetings or use it for internal discussions and everything could also be utilized. So first of all, we also need to, as a brand, you need to understand what is it that you want to do when it comes to actually tech investments pipelines. And that starts dictating the architecture, infrastructure layers you want to put on top of it. So the place that I believe, so if I go back to what I believe as a core from DPC perspective, cost and sustainability. It's often undermined is because people don't understand actually this field well enough because they're thinking from 3D perspective, but not from data perspective. Mm. So if you look at the 2D world, when we created design, creation, sketching. So it was just plain sketches and everything. And then we added some annotations, comments and everything and we sent it towards suppliers and created products. But you couldn't do data extraction in that layer. But the moment you go towards something like 3D, if you use the right fabrics and components and everything, which is from design perspective, it's not their workload, it's somebody else adding those assets in the libraries. Yeah. You actually has data sitting within the systems. So you can do easily data information like sustainability of the products because you know the fabrics that you're using in the 3D product. By attaching it, you can get sustainable scores. Mm-hmm. You can get scores. You can say like, oh, wait, this product that I'm creating costs X amount of money. And then you can also then automatically use that information to create a tech packs and informations and everything. So often for me, what excites me when it comes to 3D and DPC is actually data and sustainability based more than anything else.
Data-driven sustainability, yeah.
That's completely lost. And because why we started 3D is because of 3D people. And 3D people think of cool, innovative, creative stuff.
Yeah, I'm on that page. Not only, but
engineering background and all of it, I believe there is more to it than just cool. We can do cool stuff. It automatically comes. But doing this kind of makes brands a better brand, especially in the world where we want to be more better towards the economical aspect as well as even from a sustainable aspect. it's a very easy win in a way of getting it there.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I come from the design background. That's why I pledge guilty for being excited about cool visuals. But you know, as I evolved over the years, I also understood business strategy points behind it, and the sustainability drive behind it is such a huge thing for us here at World of Mesh. That's the whole reason why we're doing what we're doing. And the interesting part that I'm hearing about that is your view on sustainability around data and data functionality and how you can streamline things. That's a super interesting view that you shared with me. That's getting me also thinking in new directions. So thanks for that input.
Especially from the where I sit, my job is to empower the design teams with tech, with the user tech and everything. How do we make them more creative, make it better? And if we can give that information to them, they can make better products for the world. So create great products. That's it.
That's so true. I think that's also a great ending word, create great products. So let's have a look if we have any questions in our feed. Let me just scroll a little bit. We have a few people joining. Oh, I see some familiar faces. Hi, guys.
I also saw like even my friend, like the guy who actually helped me into the world of 3D, even Lijo was also like part of this thing. It was also kind of fun to see him there.
Oh, really? Really? Oh, that's so nice. So I think question-wise, we're good. Maybe the one or another person out there is still thinking of something. If you want, you can also just post it underneath the video afterwards. I'll make sure to activate the comments section this time. And maybe Ram can have a look and give an answer, or I'll just catch up with you. We'll figure something out. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining, guys. Ram, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much to you too. And yeah.
Pleasure, and thanks for inviting. And I think you're on a track. And if I can give my final thought would be is that I think, as I said, right, because it's cost and sustainability, it should not be a secret. It should be an open dialogue where we should be able to talk about these things, so that we all as entities towards the world, we can kind of contribute in a common manner. Because it's not about just making one brand better, it's about making the world better.
Yes, and really we can think beyond brands. I mean, of course, everybody's competitive and wants to get going, and that's fine, but we can also figure things out together on the way and find that good line. And I hope that this platform can build some bridges and help connect also people and share ideas worth sharing. Oh, I think I took that from Ted. Anyway, thanks so much for joining. This has been really insightful. And yeah, I mean, from all our sessions we had so far, we went through the whole line from design, strategy, design, development, pattern, all the way to you, Ram, as a product owner and looking at the tech side of it. So I think we have a good overview. We're getting through the product development cycle. So thanks so much. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening, and I'll see you guys next time then.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.